Eli Carter adjusted the strap of his backpack as he stepped onto the plane, glancing at his boarding pass one last time. Seat 23A, an aisle seat near the front of the economy section. He preferred aisles. They gave him room to stretch his legs and made it easier to escape if things got uncomfortable. And on this red-eye flight from New York to Tokyo, comfort was a priority. Work conferences always left him drained, but traveling halfway around the world felt like an entirely new level of exhaustion. The cabin hummed with activity as passengers shuffled past each other, stowing carry-ons and settling into their seats. Eli slid into 23A without much thought, pulling out his noise-canceling headphones and adjusting the headrest. He didn't notice her at first. She moved quietly, almost imperceptibly, slipping through the narrow aisle like a shadow. But when she stopped beside him, there was no ignoring her. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, with striking silver hair that caught the dim overhead light. Her skin had an ethereal glow, pale yet radiant. And her eyes. Those were what held Eli's attention longest. They shimmered faintly, like sunlight reflecting off water, though the effect seemed unnatural somehow. She wore simple clothes, a black hoodie and jeans, but something about her presence commanded focus. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice smooth and melodic. "Would you mind swapping seats? I'd prefer the window." Eli blinked, startled. People rarely asked for seat swaps unless they were desperate, and even then most travelers hesitated to inconvenience others. Still, there was something disarming about her tone. Not demanding, just polite enough to make refusal feel rude. Sure," he replied after a moment's pause. "No problem." He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, allowing her to slide into the aisle seat while he took hers by the window. As he settled in, he noticed how gracefully she moved, almost too fluidly, as though gravity affected her differently. It was odd, but not alarming. Just another quirk of modern air travel, where everyone seemed slightly strange once confined together for hours. The plane began its taxi down the runway, engines roaring to life. Eli leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, trying to ignore the dull ache of jet lag already creeping up on him. When the aircraft lifted off, however, everything changed. Turbulence hit unexpectedly, a sudden jolt that sent coffee cups rattling in their holders. Eli instinctively gripped the armrest, bracing himself. Beside him, the woman did the same, her hand brushing against his. A sharp sensation shot through his fingertips, not painful, exactly, but electric, like static electricity amplified tenfold. He flinched and turned to look at her. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, withdrawing her hand. There was genuine remorse in her voice, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or calculation. For a brief second, Eli thought he saw her pupils dilate unnaturally before returning to normal. "It's fine," he muttered, shaking off the weird feeling. Turbulence could do strange things to nerves, right? As the plane steadied, Eli tried to distract himself by scrolling through his phone. Yet every few minutes, he found himself glancing sideways at his new neighbor. She sat perfectly still, staring out the window at the endless expanse of clouds. Occasionally, someone would try to speak to her, a flight attendant offering snacks, another passenger asking about her unusual hair color, but each interaction ended strangely. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence, voices faltering as if forgotten. By the time the seatbelt sign switched off, Eli couldn't shake the nagging sense that something wasn't quite right. Whatever it was, though, it wasn't worth worrying about now. Or so he told himself. Little did he know, this simple seat swap would set off a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. As the hours dragged on, Eli found himself growing increasingly restless. The initial shock of the turbulence, and that strange electric jolt, had faded, but his curiosity about the woman beside him lingered. She hadn't said another word since their brief exchange during takeoff, and her silence was unnerving. Most people would have struck up small talk by now, or at least scrolled through their phones to pass the time. But she just sat there, perfectly still, gazing out the window as if mesmerized by the endless sea of clouds. Finally, unable to ignore the tension any longer, Eli cleared his throat. "So, are you traveling for work or vacation?" It was a harmless question, the kind strangers used to break the ice. He didn't expect much in return, but anything was better than this awkward quiet. She turned to face him, her shimmering eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel oddly exposed. "Neither," she replied after a pause. Her voice carried a musical quality, soft yet deliberate, as though every word had been carefully chosen. "I'm here because I need to be." Eli raised an eyebrow. "That's vague." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "It is, but it's also true." For a moment, Eli considered dropping the subject altogether. Clearly, this woman wasn't interested in sharing details about herself. Still, something about her intrigued him. Her calm demeanor, her otherworldly appearance, the way she seemed so out of place yet completely at ease. Against his better judgment, he pressed on. "You mentioned earlier you wanted the window seat. Any particular reason?" Her expression shifted ever so slightly, becoming more guarded. "The view helps me think," she said simply. Then, after a beat, she added, "And sometimes it reminds me of home." "Home?" Eli echoed, leaning forward slightly. "Where's that?" She hesitated before answering, as if weighing whether to trust him. When she finally spoke, her words sent a chill down his spine. "Not here. Not anywhere you'd recognize." Before Eli could respond, the plane hit another patch of turbulence, though this one was mild compared to the earlier jolt. Instinctively, he grabbed the armrest again, only to realize her hand was already resting on it. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending that same electric sensation coursing through him. This time, however, it felt stronger, almost like a pulse, resonating somewhere deep inside his chest. "I should apologize again," she said softly, pulling her hand away. "That wasn't supposed to happen." "What wasn't supposed to happen?" Eli asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Look, I don't know what's going on here, but you're acting like some kind of alien," she interrupted, her tone matter-of-fact. Eli froze, staring at her in disbelief. For a second, he thought she might be joking, but the seriousness in her gaze told him otherwise. "Wait, seriously, you're saying you're not human?" "My name is Lyra," she continued, ignoring his question. "I belong to a species called the Valith. We travel between dimensions using organic hosts to navigate physical space. Normally, we avoid contact with humans unless absolutely necessary. However," she trailed off, glancing at their hands, "when our essence bonds accidentally with someone else, complications arise." "Bonded," Eli repeated, his mind racing. "What does that even mean? Are you saying we're connected somehow?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. During the turbulence, a fragment of my energy transferred to you. It created what we call a tether, a link between us. Without intervention, this bond will grow stronger over time, affecting both of us in unpredictable ways." Eli sank back into his seat, overwhelmed. None of this made sense. Aliens, dimensions, tethers. It sounded like the plot of a bad sci-fi movie. Yet, deep down, he couldn't deny the truth in her words. Ever since touching her hand, he'd felt different, more alert, hyper-aware, as if his senses had been dialed up to 11. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For now, nothing drastic," Lyra assured him. "But staying close to me stabilizes the tether. Leaving my side would risk destabilizing it further and attracting unwanted attention." Unwanted attention from whom? Eli didn't ask. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. All he knew was that his life had just taken a turn into territory far beyond anything he'd ever imagined. And judging by the determined look in Lyra's starlit eyes, this was only the beginning. The plane finally touched down in Tokyo, its wheels screeching against the runway as dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. Eli unbuckled his seatbelt with a mix of relief and apprehension. After hours of cryptic conversations and unsettling revelations, he was ready to step off the plane, put some distance between himself and Lyra, and pretend none of this had happened. But as they filed out of the aircraft alongside other groggy passengers, Eli quickly realized that escaping wasn't going to be so easy. At customs, chaos erupted almost immediately. While Lyra breezed through immigration without issue, her passport scanned effortlessly, her face matching the photo perfectly. The same couldn't be said for Eli. When it was his turn at the counter, the officer frowned deeply at his documents. "This doesn't look right," the officer muttered, holding up Eli's passport. The picture on the ID seemed distorted, blurry around the edges, as if someone had layered another face over his own. Stranger still, faint traces of silver hair and glowing eyes could be seen ghosting across the image. Eli stared at it, dumbfounded. That wasn't his face. It couldn't be. I don't know what's wrong with it," Eli stammered, panic rising in his chest. "It's my passport." The officer tapped his fingers impatiently on the desk, clearly suspicious. "Wait here," he ordered before disappearing into a back room. Eli glanced toward the exit, where Lyra stood casually waiting, her expression unreadable. She didn't seem worried about the commotion she'd indirectly caused, or maybe she already knew how things would play out. Sure enough, moments later, the officer returned, shaking his head dismissively. "Never mind. Everything checks out," he said abruptly, handing back Eli's passport as if nothing unusual had occurred. Confused but unwilling to argue, Eli hurried after Lyra, catching up to her just outside baggage claim. "What was that?" he demanded, lowering his voice. "Did you do something to my passport?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, her shimmering eyes betraying no guilt. "Not intentionally. It's a side effect of the tether. Our connection is starting to manifest physically and digitally. Your records are beginning to reflect fragments of my identity." Eli ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling over. "Great. So now I'm stuck looking like some kind of alien-human hybrid. How am I supposed to explain this to anyone?" "You won't have to," Lyra replied calmly. "As long as we stay close, the distortions will remain minimal. Distance amplifies them, leaving my side risks, making the changes irreversible, and drawing attention from forces neither of us wants to encounter." Her words sent a chill down Eli's spine. Forces? What exactly did she mean by that? Before he could press further, Lyra gestured toward the bustling terminal. "Come. We need to leave before more anomalies occur." Reluctantly, Eli followed her through the crowded airport, trying to ignore the odd sensations creeping up on him. Every flashing signboard seemed brighter than usual. Every announcement echoed louder in his ears. Even the air felt heavier, charged with an energy he couldn't quite place. Worst of all, random strangers kept glancing at him, or was it asterisk through asterisk him? Their gazes lingered too long, their expressions shifting from curiosity to confusion, as though they couldn't quite figure out what they were seeing. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Towering skyscrapers loomed overhead, neon lights flickering despite the early morning hour. Lyra led Eli to a nondescript taxi parked near the curb. The driver nodded silently when she whispered an address in Japanese, then motioned for them to climb inside. As the car sped away, weaving through Tokyo's labyrinthine streets, Eli leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Where are we going?" he asked, breaking the tense silence. "To a safe house," Lyra explained. "A temporary refuge until we decide our next move." Eli clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't his fight. He hadn't asked for any of this. Yet deep down, he knew running wasn't an option, not anymore. Whatever strange destiny had tied him to Lyra, it wasn't letting go anytime soon. And as the city blurred past the window, Eli braced himself for whatever came next. The safe house was nothing like Eli expected. Nestled in a quiet corner of Tokyo, it looked ordinary from the outside. a small two-story building with peeling paint and flower boxes filled with wilting plants. Inside, however, the space hummed with an otherworldly energy. The walls shimmered faintly under the dim light, as though they were alive, and strange symbols etched into the floorboards pulsed softly every few seconds. It felt less like a refuge and more like stepping into another dimension entirely. Lyra moved through the room with practiced ease, lighting candles that gave off no smoke but cast eerie shadows on the walls. She gestured for Eli to sit at a low wooden table cluttered with maps, notebooks, and what appeared to be fragments of crystal shards glowing faintly in hues of blue and green. For a moment, she simply stood there, her hands resting lightly on the back of a chair, as if gathering her thoughts. "You deserve answers," she began finally, her voice steady, but tinged with something close to regret. "But first, you need to understand the stakes." Eli crossed his arms over his chest, trying to mask his unease. "Stakes? You mean beyond being tethered to an alien who's made my life a walking sci-fi movie?" Lyra ignored his sarcasm, instead reaching for one of the glowing shards on the table. Holding it up to the light, she explained, "This is part of what I came here to find. The Prism Core. Or rather, what's left of it. Centuries ago, rogue factions within my species stole the core and shattered it into pieces. They sought to weaponize its power, using it to manipulate dimensional boundaries and control entire civilizations." She set the shard down gently, her fingers lingering on its surface. "The Prism Core isn't just a tool, it's a stabilizer. Without it, tethers like ours can't be severed cleanly. Attempting to break the bond risks destabilizing both our existences, or worse, merging our minds completely." Eli stared at her, incredulous. "Merge our? What does that even mean? Are you saying I could end up sharing your brain or something?" "In essence, yes," Lyra replied bluntly. "Our consciousnesses would become intertwined, unable to function independently. Over time, neither of us would remain fully ourselves." A heavy silence settled between them. Eli felt the weight of her words pressing down on him, each one chipping away at the fragile illusion that this situation might somehow resolve itself neatly. He glanced around the room again, noticing how the pulsating symbols seemed to grow brighter, almost as if reacting to the tension in the air. "So what's the plan?" he asked after a long pause. "Track down these rogue aliens and get the core back?" Lyra shook her head. "It's not that simple. The fragments are scattered across multiple dimensions, hidden in places humans, and most Valeth can't access without proper guidance. Retrieving them requires navigating dangerous thresholds, deciphering ancient codes, and evading those who destroyed the core in the first place. And you think *I* can help with all that?" Eli scoffed. "I'm just a software engineer. I fix bugs in code, not interdimensional crises." "You underestimate yourself," Lyra countered firmly. "The tether has already begun altering you, awakening latent abilities tied to my essence. Strength, reflexes, heightened awareness, all traits necessary for survival where we're going." As if on cue, Eli felt a sudden surge of clarity, a sharpness in his senses he hadn't noticed before. The faint hum of electricity running through the walls became audible, the flickering candle flames took on distinct patterns, and even Lyra's movements seemed sharper, more defined. It was disorienting yet exhilarating, like unlocking a new level of perception. "But why me?" Eli pressed, his frustration giving way to curiosity. "Out of everyone on this planet, why did the tether choose *me*? Lyra hesitated, her starlit eyes softening slightly. "Because you're adaptable, resilient, and despite your doubts, you have a unique capacity for empathy, a trait rare among my kind. If anyone can bridge the gap between our worlds, it's you." Eli didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned forward, studying the glowing shard on the table. Its light pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a glimmer of purpose, not just obligation, but possibility. Maybe Lyra was right. Maybe he wasn't just a victim of circumstance. Maybe he was meant to play a role in something far bigger than himself. "All right," he said quietly, meeting her gaze. "Let's do this. But if I wake up tomorrow with tentacles or something, I'm blaming you." Despite herself, Lyra smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips that hinted at the trust beginning to form between them. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. The next morning, Eli woke to find Lyra already awake, poring over a map spread across the table. Her silver hair caught the dim light filtering through the curtains, and her glowing eyes darted between markings on the paper and notes scribbled in an unfamiliar script. The air in the safe house felt heavier than before, charged with an unspoken urgency that made Eli's skin prickle. "What's the plan?" he asked groggily, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he joined her at the table. Lyra glanced up briefly, her expression taut. "We're heading to Neon Vale," she said. "It's a district in Tokyo known for its black markets and underground networks. If anyone has information about the Prism Core fragments, it'll be there." Eli frowned. "Black markets? You mean like illegal stuff?" "Precisely," Lyra replied without hesitation. "The kind of place where you can buy stolen tech, rare artifacts, or secrets that shouldn't exist. It's dangerous, but necessary." Dangerous wasn't exactly what Eli had signed up for when he agreed to help Lyra. Still, he knew they didn't have much choice. Every passing hour brought new anomalies. The distortions in his passport photo were just the beginning. Earlier that morning, he'd caught his reflection in a spoon, only to see faint traces of shimmering light flickering around his pupils. Whatever was happening to him, it was accelerating. As they prepared to leave, Lyra handed him a small device resembling a sleek metallic bracelet. "Wear this," she instructed. "It'll mask your presence from anyone who might sense the tether. Not foolproof, but better than nothing." Eli slipped it onto his wrist, feeling a subtle warmth radiating from the metal. "And if someone figures out what I am anyway?" Lyra met his gaze evenly. "Then we run." Neon Vale lived up to its name in every possible way. As they stepped into the district, reality itself seemed to warp around them. Holographic billboards bled neon colors into the air, their images shifting unpredictably. A tiger morphing into a dragon, then dissolving into static. Gravity felt inconsistent. One moment, Eli's feet weighed heavily against the pavement, and the next, he swore he could jump higher than usual. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, twisting into shapes that hinted at movement even when nothing stirred. Street vendors hawked bizarre wares, jars containing floating orbs of light, vials of liquid that changed color depending on who held them, and gadgets that hummed ominously despite having no visible power source. Strangers muttered cryptic phrases as they passed, some in languages Eli recognized, others in tongues that sounded alien yet oddly familiar. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone here knew something he didn't. "This place is insane," Eli whispered to Lyra as they navigated the crowded streets. "How do people live like this?" "They don't," Lyra replied grimly. "This isn't a place for living. It's a place for surviving." Their destination was a dingy cafe tucked away in a narrow alley. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and ozone. A man with cybernetic implants embedded in his temples sat slumped over a counter, muttering numbers under his breath. Lyra approached him confidently, sliding a folded piece of paper across the bar. "I'm looking for someone who deals in Vailith artifacts," she said bluntly. The man's head snapped up, his mechanical eyes scanning her face before flicking to Eli. For a split second, Eli thought he saw a recognition flash in those cold, artificial lenses, but then the man smirked, leaning back lazily. "You're not the first to ask," he drawled, "but most don't walk out alive after finding what they're looking for." Before Lyra could respond, the cafe's lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. When they came back on, half the patrons were gone, including the man. In his place lay a crumpled note bearing a single address scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Well," Eli muttered, staring at the paper. "That went well." Lyra clenched her jaw, clearly annoyed but unfazed. "We need to move. Now." As they hurried out of the cafe, Eli couldn't help but notice how the shadows seemed to follow them, stretching longer with each step. Whatever awaited them at the address, one thing was certain: danger lurked closer than ever. Yet despite the fear gnawing at him, Eli felt a strange thrill coursing through his veins. This was real. This was happening. And somehow, he was ready for it. The address led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Neon Vale, its crumbling walls covered in graffiti that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay, and faint whispers echoed through the empty halls, as though the building itself were alive. Eli hesitated at the entrance, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But Lyra moved forward without hesitation, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Inside, they found themselves face to face with a man who looked more machine than human. His body was encased in sleek black armor, wires snaking across his skin like veins, and his voice carried a mechanical edge when he spoke. "You're late," the dealer growled, stepping into the dim light. "I don't like waiting." Lyra didn't flinch. "We're here for information about the Prism Core. Do you have it or not?" The man smirked, tilting his head slightly. "Ah, yes, the infamous Prism Core. Tell me, Valeth, why should I help you? Your kind destroyed my world once. Why shouldn't I sell you to the highest bidder instead?" Eli stiffened, glancing at Lyra. She hadn't mentioned this part, that her species might have enemies far beyond rogue factions. Before she could respond, the man lunged, his armored hand shooting out to grab her by the throat. Eli reacted instinctively, leaping forward and shoving the man away. To his surprise, strength surged through him, more than he'd ever felt before, and the dealer stumbled backward, momentarily stunned. "Run!" Lyra shouted, pulling Eli toward a side door as alarms blared overhead. Behind them, the man roared in fury, shouting orders to unseen accomplices. Footsteps thundered down the corridor, and flashes of red laser beams sliced through the darkness. They burst out into the night, sprinting through narrow alleys as their pursuers closed in. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, but adrenaline kept him moving. He could feel the tether vibrating between him and Lyra, pulsing with energy that seemed to guide their steps. At one point, Lyra grabbed his arm and yanked him into a hidden alcove, just as a group of armed figures ran past, their weapons glowing ominously. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Eli turned to Lyra, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "What the hell was that? You said we were coming here for answers, not to get ambushed." "I didn't know he'd recognize me," Lyra admitted, her voice tight with guilt. "He's one of the survivors from a colony my kind abandoned centuries ago. They've been hunting us ever since. And you didn't think to mention that sooner." Eli snapped. Before Lyra could reply, the ground beneath them trembled violently. A massive figure emerged from the shadows, a hulking mech suit piloted by the dealer himself. Its eyes glowed crimson, and its metal fists clenched as it advanced toward them. "There's no escape now," the man sneered. "You'll pay for what your people did." Eli stepped protectively in front of Lyra, his newfound abilities kicking in again. Time seemed to slow as he dodged a swipe from the mech's massive hand, rolling to the side and grabbing a piece of broken pipe lying nearby. With unnatural speed and precision, he hurled it at the mech's exposed wiring, causing sparks to fly. The machine staggered, giving Lyra enough time to summon a shimmering barrier of light that repelled the next attack. As the battle raged on, Eli realized something crucial. Their bond wasn't just a curse. It was also a weapon. Together, they fought in sync, anticipating each other's moves as though they shared a single mind. When the mech finally collapsed in a heap of smoking metal, the dealer lay unconscious inside. Panting, Eli turned to Lyra. "Is this what our lives are going to be like now? Running and fighting every step of the way?" She met his gaze, her expression softening. "Not forever. But there's something else you need to know." She paused, her voice barely above a whisper. The prism core isn't just shattered. It's been scattered across multiple dimensions. Each fragment is guarded by forces far stronger than anything we've faced so far. Eli stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. This journey wasn't just dangerous. It was impossible. Yet, as he looked into Lyra's starlit eyes, he realized something else. He wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Then we'll find a way, he said firmly. One piece at a time. For the first time, Lyra smiled. A genuine smile that hinted at hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. The sun was rising over Tokyo as Eli and Lyra made their way back to the safe house, battered but alive. The events of the night weighed heavily on them both. Bruises forming on Eli's arms, Lyra's hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the glowing shard tucked into her pocket. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a newfound sense of clarity. They had survived against overwhelming odds, not because of sheer luck, but because they had each other. Inside the safe house, the air felt different, calmer, almost welcoming. The pulsating symbols on the floorboards dimmed to a soft glow, as if sensing their resolve. Eli collapsed onto one of the cushions scattered around the room, letting out a long breath. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice tinged with exhaustion, but also curiosity. Lyra sat across from him, her silver hair catching the morning light streaming through the window. For once, she didn't look like the enigmatic alien who had turned his life upside down. Instead, she seemed human, vulnerable even. Now, she began softly, "We keep moving forward, one fragment at a time." Eli raised an eyebrow. "That's it. No grand plan. No secret weapon." Lyra chuckled faintly, the sound surprising him. It was warm, almost melodic. "If I had a grand plan, I'd tell you. But this isn't about plans anymore. It's about trust. Trust in ourselves and in each other." Her words lingered in the silence that followed. Eli thought back to everything they'd been through. The seat swap on the plane, the distorted passport photo, the fight in the warehouse. Each moment had brought them closer, not just physically but emotionally. He realized now that the tether wasn't just a curse, it was a connection. Imperfect, yes, but undeniable. "What happens if we fail?" Eli asked after a while, his tone quieter. "What if we can't find all the pieces? Or worse, what if we do, and it doesn't work?" Lyra met his gaze, her starlit eyes reflecting both determination and uncertainty. "Then we'll face whatever comes next, together. But I believe in us, Eli. You've already proven stronger than I ever imagined." Her faith in him caught him off guard. For so long, he doubted himself, dismissed his role in this bizarre journey as accidental. But now, sitting here with Lyra, he understood something important. He wasn't just along for the ride. He was part of it, essential to it. As the day wore on, they began planning their next move. Lyra pulled out another map, this one marked with locations across the globe and beyond. Cities, deserts, underwater ruins, even places that defied logic. Each point represented a potential lead on a prism core fragment. Eli traced the lines with his finger, marveling at how vast their quest truly was. "We'll start here," Lyra said, pointing to a spot labeled *Edinburgh*. "There's a library rumored to hold ancient Valith texts. If anyone knows where the fragments are hidden, it'll be there." Eli nodded, feeling a spark of excitement despite the enormity of the task ahead. "All right. Let's pack up and head out." Before they left, Lyra handed him a small device similar to the bracelet she'd given him earlier. This one, however, emitted a faint hum when activated. "It'll help stabilize the tether while we travel," she explained. "And it'll protect you if things get dangerous." Eli slipped it onto his wrist, feeling its warmth spread through him. "Thanks," he said simply. At the airport later that day, they boarded another plane bound for Europe. As the aircraft climbed higher into the sky, Eli glanced at Lyra seated beside him. She was gazing out the window again, lost in thought. He wanted to say something, to thank her for trusting him, for showing him a world he never knew existed, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. The turbulence no longer bothered him. In fact, he welcomed it. Every jolt reminded him that he was alive, that he was part of something bigger than himself. And as the plane soared onward, carrying them toward Edinburgh and whatever mysteries awaited, Eli smiled faintly. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be ordinary again. And strangely, he was okay with that.